Good morning, Bethany Chapel. Before we talk about any of the updates or scripture for the week, I just want to be encouraging you to pray for all the victims and their families of the mass shooting that happened in Nova Scotia. Be bringing those people before God. This is just such an incredible tragedy, and we want to be sending them God's peace and God's love and just, I don't know, there really aren't words, but bring those things to God on their behalf in this time. Also, just a couple of updates for this week. Tune in for Beard Talk at 7 o'clock on Wednesday night as well. There's a youth Zoom call afterwards. Just get in touch with Devin about that. Also, there's young adults Bible study and Zoom on Thursday night. Again, get in touch with Devin about that. As well, we have our 11 a.m. check-ins on Facebook and Instagram Live, Monday through Friday this week. So grab a coffee, join us for that, check in with your community, and let's be praying together. So this morning's scripture is from John 3, verses 1 to 8. I'll be reading from the What Jesse Can Remember version because I'm in the car. So what Jesse can remember. So the WJCR version. But this is the story of Nicodemus. Now we're familiar with Nicodemus as one of the leading Pharisees at the time, and he goes and meets Jesus under the cover of darkness because he's convinced Jesus is from God, but he has some questions. So he begins by saying, Jesus, obviously you're from God. No one speaks like you do. No one's doing miracles like you do. So it's obvious you're from God, but there's got to be more to this. And this gets them into the conversation of if anyone wants to be part of the kingdom, they need to be born from above. We're more familiar with the phrase born again, but it can also be translated as born from above. And this is the part where Nicodemus gets confused and he says, how can you hop back into the womb and be born again when you're old? And Jesus says, okay, you're not really getting me here. We're talking about being born of the Spirit, and then he talks about, the wind blows this way and that way, but you don't know where it comes from, as it's like this for those who are born of the Spirit. Now, there's this fun little wordplay in there because the word for wind is the Greek word pneuma, which means breath or breeze, but that is also used in reference to the Spirit. So pneuma can also mean spirit. It's also a throwback to the Hebrew term that, where they talk about the Spirit hovering over the waters in Genesis. The term for spirit is also breath or wind. And so it was kind of understood from the Jewish scriptures that the Spirit of God is kind of the breath of God, the wind of God. So there's some fun little wordplay at the end of this passage about the wind and the Spirit. The thing I wanted to focus on out of here, though, is, there's a lot of meat on the bone when it comes to the, born from above, and you must be born again. And there's a great, we could get into the indwelling of the Spirit and how Christ dwells in us and how we become new creations. That Jesus doesn't just slap a coat of paint on the old. He's not like a bad house flipper where, they paint a few things, change the cabinets, and then sell the house for, X amount more of dollars. Jesus is not a house flipper. We're new creations. It's like ripping the thing down to the foundations and building an entirely new house. The indwelling and the mystery of being a new creation. And there's a lot there. But I kind of want to jump more on, about Nicodemus, because something occurred to me this morning while I was reading this passage. Nicodemus has a lot to lose from being seen meeting with Jesus. Like, a lot. He's esteemed. He has a high position in the religious establishment. And then he's out hanging out with this outsider, this troublemaker, this, some would call him even a blasphemer, or just, something. Most of the religious establishment thought that there was something seriously wrong with Jesus. They were not fans. They were not fans of Jesus. He hung out with the wrong people. He uplifted the wrong people. He said he challenged their authority constantly. And so they were just not fans. So Nicodemus has a ton to lose by even being seen with Jesus, which is why he kind of sneaks out under the cover of darkness. But there's something so compelling about Jesus that he takes the risk. He risks his position. He risks his reputation because he has questions. He finds Jesus compelling, and he has questions. So he risks to ask these questions. And what was really, what I was really rumbling with in my spirit about this today, and what really caught me, was what are the questions that I feel are too risky to ask Jesus, that I want to know. I want to ask these questions. I want to bring these things to Jesus, but I don't want to risk either my certainty, or I don't want to risk being seen as this, or I don't want to risk being seen as that. And so I don't bring those questions to God. I don't bring those questions to Jesus. That's what I was kind of rumbling with my spirit. What questions am I, where I'm more worried about my reputation than, being honest with God about where I'm at. I'm more worried about my own stability, and therefore I'm not honest. I don't bring those things to God. I don't bring those things to Jesus. So I want to encourage you with two things here. First of all, there is no question that is too big for God. There is no need to be afraid of, afraid of questions. God remains God. Jesus remains compelling. Jesus remains Jesus. Questions aren't going to all of a sudden magically poof and disappear that. Jesus remains Jesus. God remains God. And there is scriptural precedent for asking hard questions, for bringing questions to God. I constantly go back to the Psalms, which were a centerpiece of worship in the Hebrew scriptures. The Psalms were worship music. And they were kind of the blues, but that's a discussion for another day. But they were the worship music of the Israelites. They're the worship music of the Hebrew scriptures. And there's some stuff in there that I'm just like, wow, if we put that stuff in any of our worship music, we wouldn't be able to handle it. Actually, you know what? Let me take that back. I think we need to put some of that stuff, but there are lots of questions. There's lots of, laments. There's some tough stuff in there. And yet the psalmist never hesitates to bring that stuff before God. Because ultimately the psalmist lands in this place of, God, this sucks. I have these questions. Why don't you show up? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? But you are still here. But you are still present. You are still with me. And I think that's the baseline thing, is whatever you have to risk, whether it's position, status, reputation, or your own certainty, God will still be present with you in that journey. God will still be present with you in your questions, and God remains God. Jesus remains Jesus. The Spirit remains present with you. So with that, just encourage you to have a great day. Be well, be safe. And if there's anything you need, there's a number and email at the end of this video. Please get in touch if you need anything. We want to be helping you out. All right. Be safe, y'all, and wash your hands. See you tomorrow.